Insights on Monday, the 29th of June, 2 days to go until the financial year end. Business Insights is a very exciting webinar series hosted weekly on Mondays at midday by a panel of industry thought leaders for business owners who simply just want to be in the know about the latest and greatest and most significant news and initiatives in the Australian business landscape and how they affect their business and how they can get through that. Our panel advisors aim to inform, educate and provide strategic insights to the changes in the economic, legislative and financial landscape that affects small business. We aim to guide our viewers to navigate business challenges through COVID-19 and beyond. Before we do that, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that the views and expressions and opinions portrayed on this webinar are not designed to be personal advice for your specific needs. If you need to do that, please reach out to any of the industry thought leaders that are on the webinar today to get that specific advice. Now, let's meet our panel of industry thought leaders. First of all, we've got Liza Garrido from Indigna HR.
Good morning, everybody.
Next, we've got Rob Skeen from Oasis Skeen Property Buyers Agents.
Good morning, Adam. G'day, viewers. Great to be here.
Next, we've got Sam Qureshi from MoneyClick Private Wealth.
Hi, everybody. Great to be on board.
And today we've got Ian Maclachlan from Imperium Accounting and Tax.
Thanks, Adam. Very excited to be here.
I'm Adam Lysle from O'Brien Palmer, and we've got a special guest today on our panel. We've got Yuri Zhang from Biz Lawyers. How are you going, Yuri?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for having me on this panel.
Fantastic. And we're glad that you're here, and Bernard's away today, but that's okay. I think we're going to be in good hands with Yuri.
Welcome.
First, I'm going to hit the ground running with Rob Skeen. What is the latest and greatest in the property world, Rob?
Thanks, Adam. Well, last week, Domain Group recorded 529 dwellings going under the gavel with a final clearance rate of 64%, up 1% actually from last week, which was 63%. Now, here's an interesting fact. Clearance rates this time last year was at 67%. So not much difference between this time last year. And it really shows the resilient property market that we're having here in Australia, even with the pandemic. Today, I wanted to cover the first home buyers grant in New South Wales, or FOG, as we like to call it in the property circles. The first homeowner grant for new homes offers $10,000 for the purchase or construction of a new property. The value of the newly constructed property must be under $600,000. Now, if you're buying land to build a property, the combined land and dwelling must be valued at no more than $750,000. Are there stamp duty concessions available? Yes, there are. The FOG scheme provides first home buyers with exemptions from stamp duty on new homes valued less than $650,000 and concessions for new homes valued between $650,000 and $800,000. Now, no stamp duty is payable for eligible purchasers buying a vacant block of residential land valued up to $350,000, while concessions are available for vacant land purchased between $350,000 and $450,000. Reach out to Sammy G if you'd like to know more. He'll tell you how to be eligible for those grants. Highest property sale of the week. It was snapped up in 3 days of being on the market. It was 64 Edward Street, Willara, a Nick Tobias designed 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom residence, double garage overlooking the gorgeous Cooper Park. Now, it was bought by none other than the radio star Jackie O for $11 million. Now, she recently sold her house in Vaucluse after the breakdown of her marriage for $6.5 million. She's single at the moment, so if you guys know her at all, I'd love an introduction. It would be most appreciated. Not for the money, we have the same values, I believe. Folks, that's all from me this week. See you next week.
Well done, Rob. Hopefully, as a good property agent, you'll have her contact details you can pass on to any of our viewers that want that. That'll be great. To keep up that fantastic spirit, and of course, a good segue, because Rob's mentioned the great Sam Qureshi. We'll turn to Sam now. What's the latest greatest in the world of finance this week, Sam?
Yeah, so with finance in particular, there's lots of impact occurring in terms of banking. Firstly, a quick update on the rates. We've just seen a couple of lenders, ING and Adelaide Bank, increase their fixed rates, which flies in the face of other lenders at the moment. They've said that it's based on their margins being compressed, but we would have to see that picks up a bit of momentum in terms of the fixed rates, maybe starting to move upwards a little bit. The fixed rates currently have been affected by the fact that the government is basically operating in the bond market and artificially keeping those rates reasonably low. Certainly for the week that we've just had gone by, what we've had is that these particular actions requires essentially being looked at, and that's where we can specifically help clients in relation to that. What I should also say is that the banks are still very much looking at their what we call an assessment rate as a way for them to work out how much you can borrow. This is last week we talked about the 3 C's of credit. One of them was capacity, and that's where that sits. So, for example, a 500k repayment at say 2.75% variable rate, the repayment on that is just over $2,000. But the bank uses 5.5% to work out whether you can afford it or not, which means that's about $2,800 or $800 more is what they assume that you can afford before they're going to lend you the money. And that's a really key metric that the banks uses. So be very mindful that often, even if you can afford to borrow money, to invest, to buy a house, to refinance, if you can't meet those assessment rate metrics, it's not going to help you. Lastly, I was just going to make a very brief mention of the fact that there's other metrics that the banks are very much red hot on. Living expenses and the estimate of those once you purchase the property is very big, and also credit cards. So there's a move towards people using more and more credit cards. The credit card limit gets used as your commitment, and gets used based on 3.8% of your limit, regardless of what your balance is. So a 10k limit basically has a monthly commitment of $380, and of course that reduces your ability to be able to borrow. So you should keep that in mind in terms of interest rates.
Thanks, Sam. That's really good. And in terms of the stock market, do you want to just quickly mention how the ASX are going in comparison to internationals, or do you want to do that a bit later?
I'm happy to do it now. That's fine. So we've had a really interesting week last week. Market was down 7.7% for the week. Not a lot happened. We had a down day, a really bad day on Thursday. It somewhat recovered on Friday, but there's definitely a lot of risk, and that risk is all around the fact that the market is starting to wonder about the second wave and it essentially picking up pace somewhat. So last week we heard about Qantas. They raised about $1.36 billion to get them through this particular tough time, but they're also shedding 6,000 people. And this might be a trend that we'll be seeing more and more of as other businesses start to look at recalibrating for the COVID era based level of business. For example, globally, Microsoft is closing all their stores worldwide. They're only going to be online. Apple is only going to have 8 stores open. Woolies, despite the fact that you would think that they did really well in this particular period of time, they actually didn't make that much extra money, and they're shedding 1,350 people. Even ABC is shedding about 200 people. So, interesting times from that perspective. I guess the tourism stocks in particular were heavily hit on Friday. Webjet, Flight Centre, and corporate travel, they were all down about 15 to 19%. I'm sure that you'll probably cover this a little bit more in your talk, Adam. But Virgin Australia has a new buyer, has a new owner. So obviously you can talk about that, I'm sure, as part of an advisory stuff. I think the market is very nervous. Definitely the impact on the employment post-JobKeeper is $236 billion of loan deferrals that needs to be restarted is going to weigh heavily. So we're probably going to hear a lot more about how that's going to develop over time. And I guess the thing I would say to everyone is it's a time to be very prudent. It's a very good idea for you to start building some type of reserve that you can call upon if things go south, or for a long period of time, things aren't looking that up.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. That's really good, and thank you. And I will be covering off the Virgin thing a bit later. I guess one of the things I keep hearing about this week, and just from friends and family that have got businesses, is the working from home arrangements. And I'm going to bring in Liza Garrido here, who's a guru on everything about employment and HR. And Liza, I guess the question really is, What is a good update that we can give to our listeners about working from home arrangements?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. More businesses and workers are realizing the benefits of working from home, and a new study indicates that as many as 86% of workers would like to continue working from home, at least on a part-time basis, or even after workplace resumes normal operations. So an independent survey of 1,000 employees, that's our sampling, working full-time or part-time during this pandemic period reveals that 73% believe that their employers would be open to a permanent work-from-home arrangement, whilst 22% already have these arrangements in place. Very interesting. As for the frequency of working from home, 28% prefer working from home full-time, 39% prefer working from home 1 to 2 days a week, and a smaller 20% would prefer 3 to 4 days a week. But interestingly, 8% said that their work from home requests were rejected by their employers. So this survey actually is indicative that after the pandemic, Aussie workers want workplaces to change permanently. They've discovered that they can be actually productive with the proper digital resources, like the proper technology, basically. And that in that survey, 33% of them said that their organization would actually increase productivity. If this trend continues, we all need to be on board with a suite of remote working digital tools to replicate as much as possible what it's like on site, or what the office experience should already be, if organizations haven't already done that. What I've been mentioning in the last few weeks really is that it's not all about the digital resource and what resources when it comes to managing your people. It's as much about upskilling your managers to be able to manage a team remotely. It's about engaging all team members in looking at streamlining processes to allow for this digital platform and transition to a more efficient business operations. As Sam indicated, it is prudent to actually look at cost minimization. This should also include evaluating telecommunication systems that you've got and possibly looking at call forwarding capabilities more permanently to ensure that you are maintaining higher level of customer service. Particularly when there is a spike of inbound calls, you can upscale using call forwarding capabilities and using the data from those technologies to make the right business decisions as to how long calls are, who are the people that respond to phone calls, and how much these cost. So I would like to recommend, though, and remind all businesses that you should still continue to complete your own safe work assessment for those employees working from home. It's important that you owe the same obligations to these employees as you do when they perform their work at the usual place of work. So the suitable approach is to look at SafeWorks website. There's so much helpful guidance and publications on working remotely during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I urge all businesses to revisit that. As for those businesses that are encouraging their workers to return to their usual place of work, I urge you to consult with your employees and be reasonable as you transition them back to work. There is no one-size-fits-all approach here. There are employees genuinely apprehensive and need some assurances, like the vulnerable workers. So transport is still a big issue for staff. They are unlikely to want to brave the catching buses and trains, and you really need to ensure that these risks are minimized, like the staggered starts and times, and also that would alleviate the public transport crowding and mitigating transmission in the workplace. The role of, or the use of hand sanitizers, for instance, can trigger skin allergies or skin conditions, and you need to look at alternatives for these. The use of PPE or masks, even if a workplace assessment requires it, employees can still refuse to wear that, surprisingly. So find out what the real issue is and ask you why they're dismissive of that request. Find out the real issues behind that, as they genuinely could be suffering anxiety. And if you go down the track of reasonable direction, which basically says that you have no choice but follow our instructions, you may in fact, by using that direction, create a situation where you have caused them injury if you haven't had proper consultation. So vulnerable workers, those with compromised immune systems, illnesses, or age-related problems, you must consider them in your risk assessment. You are required by law to do this and provide reasonable adjustments. So you might actually need to spend a little bit more money to allow for someone that is vulnerable or with some disability to return to the workplace. It's important, though, that when you're directing them to return back to work, that you don't compromise other workplace laws like discrimination. So employers may believe that you have crafted the best COVID-safe return to work plan, but if you haven't considered the vulnerable workers in this plan and people with disabilities, you could be breaching discrimination laws, which brings me to the fact that you need to be more than ever mindful as employers to be very sensitive that you don't take any adverse action on employees who ask questions all the time about their health, about safety matters, about job keeper, job seeker. Heaps of questions will be asked, and your response and reaction to these questions is vitally important. Yuri, I'm sure from your legal practice, and if you provide any employment law advice, if you react badly when you're asked questions in this very challenging and sensitive time, like for instance, saying, don't be stupid and stop asking those questions, or saying to them that you're just being difficult, etc., you may face an adverse claim. So these are just things to be mindful of in this very tricky period when all organizations are making very tough decisions now as to whether or not what the new normal would look like. The last thing I'd really like to say is, despite all of this and despite all the logistics you need to consider, focus on the culture you are trying to uphold, everybody. Culture doesn't have to change in this period. And if you lose sight of that culture, well, then I think it's more than the pandemic that you should be worried about, because a good culture is not very easy to build, but certainly very easy to lose. And that's it for me, Adam.
Thanks, Lisa. That's every time I hear you speak about HR, I can see how passionate you are, but also how knowledgeable you are. And I encourage everyone to reach out to Lisa if they do have any of those issues. One person who's very passionate about money and finance and making sure that the financial new year comes and we all celebrate is a guy who's smarter than the average bear when it comes to that field, and that's Ian Maclachlan from Imperium Accounting and Tax. And Ian, you're usually the host of these things, so I thank you for the opportunity to step into your breach, but you must be a busy man this week.
Yeah, thanks very much, Adam. I really do appreciate you stepping in. It is a very busy time of year. Each financial year seems to be more busy than the last. I don't possibly see how next financial year can be busier than this one, but let's wait and see. So you're right, tomorrow is New Year's Eve. It's tonight's, New Year's Eve. Well, no, tomorrow, 30th, that's right. So we've got 2 more days until the end of financial year, then we're done. Wednesday is the 1st of July, and that is the beginning of the 2021 financial year. I cannot believe it. So just a couple of things I wanted to touch on was in keeping from the work from home theme that we've got going on today. I just want to make sure that I am on, that's okay. So let's just recap on a couple of things. So the ATO has simplified the claim processes. So I'm getting asked this question a lot by people. So they've simplified the claim process for the masses forced to work from home during the coronavirus lockdown by boosting the standard hourly rate this financial year, being the 2020 financial year, that they can claim for their work from home expenses from 52 cents per working hour to 80 cents per working hour. However, I urge people not to be seduced into accepting this increased flat rate on offer this tax season. Just remember, this concession covers off heating, cooling, electricity, and then payments to do with your computer, printer, cartridges, and paper. People need to be careful with this concession because it's only 80 cents per hour. And when you factor in that over a standard 40-hour week, it's only $32 per week. Now, this is available for the period the 1st of March to the 30th of June. So when you times that $32 by 12, we get to a grand total of $384. It's not a lot. So opting for the flat rate of 80 cents means that the taxpayer will forgo their right to claim the new desk or chair or computer or printer that they may have splashed out on when the pandemic forced the majority of us to go into and work from home. So I strongly encourage everyone to work closely with their accountant to make sure that they are getting the maximum claim possible and not just opting for the easy shortcut rate. And that is what the ATO has called it. It's a shortcut rate of 80 cents per hour. The next thing I wanted to cover off was an interesting development this week that the ATO has finally brought out. So under pressure from a number of bodies is the Division 7A minimum repayment. Now I'm just going to do a quick recap on what Division 7A is. So basically, if a shareholder or their associate is to take money out of a company and not repay it by the end of the year, this needs to be put on a 7-year loan agreement and interest needs to be charged at a commercial rate. Now, at the end of the financial year, they need to make sure that they repay the minimum repayment under that loan agreement. If not, the ATO can deem that entire amount an unfranked dividend in that individual's tax return for that financial year. So obviously with COVID going on, the ATO has been under pressure to relax these rules a little bit. So what they've done is they've created a form, and basically the form you can fill out and you can request an extension with the ATO. And that basically means that if you cannot meet your minimum repayment by the end of the 2020 financial year, you're now going to be given until the end of the 2021 financial year to meet that minimum repayment. But that's also on top of the minimum repayment for that financial year as well. So there's just a couple of things to be wary of there, but that's really important pieces to look at when you're doing your tax planning. Obviously, there's only 2 more days to go, and the ATO has taken their time in getting this one to us, but it is something that is really worth considering. So Adam, that was it from me today. So thanks very much.
I'm a little bit surprised, Dan. I thought you would have dominated the discussion today for another 20 minutes, but it's good. It's hard to keep a good man down, but good luck and hope you have a nice glass of champagne for New Year's. Speaking of a gentleman and a scholar, Mr. Yuri Zhang, now you're a guest on the panel today. We really do appreciate you coming along. One of the most common questions we've received over the last month or so in doing Business Insights is the rights of landlords and the rights of tenants in commercial property negotiations. It keeps coming up. Even this week, I've seen a scenario where a landlord has locked out a business and has basically disregarded the legislation or the guidelines that have come into place. Can you give us a latest and greatest on how that works and in practical terms, what can people do?
Okay, great. Thank you, Adam. I'll try my best. It is a difficult space because, it's still evolving. The pandemic, started, it's still going. It's topical on what's happening with the JobKeeper program. It's that period of time. It's not clear. So there's a few things happening. Look, and I think I'll cover some basic ground first, right? So I think we're aware that the National Cabinet introduced a mandatory code of conduct that talked about commercial leasing principles during this COVID period. So it affects retail, office, industrial spaces, and the only sort of test is that the tenant is on the government's JobKeeper program. What some people don't realize, initially when we saw that, we thought, mandatory code, it's only a code, it's leasing principles, but it is enacted in legislation. So it is now, there is a regulation, which is the Retail and Other Commercial Leases Regulation, which was enacted in April 2020. The difficulty with this is, although there's this regulation, there's the code, there's the principles, it's the ultimate goal, and because it's such a complex problem, right, between landlords and tenants, there's so many different variables, there's different situations. So the ultimate goal, the ultimate principle is, you negotiate in good faith, right? And that's so hard because, every tenant, every landlord is different. And so while you're negotiating, I've heard, we had recently a potential client who is a cafe owner, and they had a cafe in the CBD. Now that business has been impacted severely during this period because they were closed. And so their trade is severely impacted. And so how it works is, say your trade has reduced by 80%. So under the code, then half of that, so 40% must be offered by the landlord as a rental waiver. And so that goes off your rent. The other half of that, so the other 40%, is then deferred by the landlord over a period of minimum of 24 months. So that's I guess the basic minimum premise that you're going in there for negotiations. Yeah? And you've got to start with that, I think. And I think that is, that's the real effect of the code. What we're finding is, landlords are taking their time to get back to you. For example, my scenario, the landlord's a multinational company overseas. And so in the meantime, your tenants really, on top of the cash flow, on top of the business expenses, on top of everything else, they have no certainty about what's happening with the rent. And so when it comes to a decision, whether you keep going, whether you talk to an insolvency practitioner like yourself, or whatever the case is, they're still in limbo. And that's a real difficulty with this. The real recourse under this code and legislation is mediation, right? So you can then mediate this with the Small Businesses Commissioner. But again, it's hard, right? There's no clear, fast answer to this. And that's understandable because it's such a complex situation. But what we would recommend is that, you engage in written communication with your landlord so that it's all documented. You try to fast track as much as possible with them. If you don't get a result, then you have to then consider opting for mediation sooner than later, because then it gives you then some clarity of what's going to happen with this lease. Because if you can't negotiate a good outcome, then you've got to then really consider what your other options are, right? And that's what I think tenants are struggling with at the moment.
Thanks, Yuri. One of the questions we've just had pop up is how a lot of people are scared about going and seeing a lawyer about their businesses and trying to work out what to do. Is it really something to be scared about? What's your view? I mean, I guess you've got a biased opinion, but can you just maybe ease some of those concerns?
Yeah, look, we're here to help. Like each of the professionals on this panel are here to help you. So I think you shouldn't be worried or concerned at all, because really we're here to help you, and we're all experts in our own field. Just like that business person is an expert in their field. So come and rely on your experts, right? And we'll take time to understand your business. We'll take time to have a chat with you, and we're happy to offer a free consultation and also help you through this difficult time, because at the end of it, everyone's just trying to come out of this as best we can. So feel free. Look, we'll try to speak. The ethos of Biz Lawyers is to speak in plain English to you. It's all of these problems are complex, but as you've seen with this panel, we've explained it as simply as possible, right? So don't be worried. Come and have a chat with us, because then at least you've got some more considerations to factor into, and then you can make an informed decision.
Thanks, Yuri, and thanks again for coming on. Well, I guess the last stanza is from me, and I just wanted to talk to our viewers today about the announcement that was made on Friday about Virgin Australia, and Bain Capital are the winning bidder. Funny, it wasn't a ringing endorsement though, because the other ones dropped out. So here's the situation. You've got 12,000 creditors who are owed $7 billion. They've still got to approve this deal. It's not a done deal yet. The federal government have still got to come to the table with all the money that they've got to put on the table. Otherwise, Bain Capital are going to walk out. So you could end up with a situation where you've got Virgin Australia purportedly being sold, but actually it doesn't go ahead. So things, don't count your chickens before they hatch. And if anyone's, July 1, the restrictions are lifted and you're running around booking flights on Virgin, just please be careful. Make sure you've got some good travel insurance in place. The thing is, a lot of people have been asking you, well, who is Bain Capital? What are their other success stories? Well, the reality is they've got $105 billion in the US invested in various ways and means. They do have experience in the aircraft industry and the airline industry with Atlas Air. Atlas Air. I haven't caught a flight on Atlas Air before. They're a commercial operator. Okay, so just be careful. We were talking about chalk and cheese. They are, however, linked with Richard Branson's Virgin Cruises venture. Richard Branson, hang on, he used to own Virgin Australia, didn't he? So are they all coming around to count their chickens after they've already been hatched? Funnily enough, Bain Australia has only been around for 4 years, and in last year was the first year that they actually appointed one of their partners and promoted him to partner. So they haven't had a huge amount of track record in Australia. So let's look at some of the recent Australian ventures that they've been involved with. Toys R Us. Anyone been there lately? MYOB. Geez, they're going well. They're getting zero, aren't they? Boost Juice. Camp Australia. I guess my point is that all these companies took really big hits and they haven't necessarily been massive success stories after a private equity firm like Bain Capital's been involved with them. In fact, private equity and venture capitalists in Australia don't have a great track record at all. Look at Dick Smith. What a basket case that ended up being. Bain actually in Australia owned 20% of Tower, and Sam can tell you all about that. They bought it from Suncorp in 2018, and they are very heavily involved in the Future Fund, which probably gives them a little bit of credibility with the Australian government. But I'm going to ask you this question, and I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to work out. How does Bain Capital make their money? Well, they actually make off the demise of others. They will eventually put creditors in Australia out the door first before they'll put their hand in their pocket. And when you're talking about $7 billion of creditors, that's a lot of money to be lost before Bain Capital have to put their hand in their pocket and put money on the table. So Australian creditors and investors do have long memories. They do remember the likes of Dick Smith and those other disasters from these types of arrangements. And I again make the point that if Bain Capital were the only one left standing and they haven't done a deal with the creditors yet and they haven't done a deal with the federal government, watch this space. It could actually end up being worse than the situation that's been presented at the moment. Other than that, it is the end of the financial year, folks. I'm really excited. I think it's really, if this isn't a stimulant for you to order a full comprehensive business health check, particularly in the current environment, I don't know what is. So take that little tip on board and just, check it out. Get your business checked over by a professional advisor. Ian Maclachlan, Rob Skeen, Yuri Zhang, Sam Geraci and Liza Garrido are fantastic people at making sure that they're looking after business interests, and any of us are available. Get in touch with us and we'd love to talk to you. Make sure that your business is sustainable and make sure it gets and keeps in that survival mode throughout this next period. We are in recession, of course. Who knows what's going to happen at the June 30 figures. The Treasurer has already predicted that we'll stay in recession for the foreseeable future. And hopefully, Rob Skeen is going to lead the charge and resurge the economy and get us back out in the black again. Any questions from any of the panelists?
I just wanted to make a statement. If this is New Year's Eve, does that mean 2020 is over? Please, let's put it behind us. Adam, I just want to carry on in terms of travelling. If somebody's thinking about going across the border before restrictions ease, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but a friend of mine, he went and visited his parents. They live in New South Wales, on the border of New South Wales and Queensland. And there's a sign there that if you drive across the border, you can be fined over $66,000 in Queensland. Did you guys know that?
Yeah, I went to Queensland. I went to Queensland recently to see my son on compassionate grounds, and I got a proper border pass, and I had the COVID test before I left, and I did everything right. And when I saw that sign where you could be fined $66,000 if you breach all of the criteria, I thought, holy hell, I'm going to need to be getting Sam Geraci and Ian Maclachlan to give me a really good loan if I get caught.
It's a good deterrent. I tell you, they should change the slogan to Queensland, beautiful one day, off limits the next.
I think that's your joke of the day, isn't it?
That is gold. That is absolutely gold.
Adam,
I don't think we have the same situation in Adelaide, because I haven't seen my partner for this length of time. And, we live in Adelaide as well. So, but with the COVID restrictions again, spiraling upward again for Victoria, it'll be very interesting. Watch this space again, guys, I tell you.
Adam, this is a question for you, and Sam, you probably might know the answer as well. But Bain Capital was founded by Mitt Romney, who was the Republican candidate running against Obama in the 2012 election. Does he still have anything to do with Bain Capital these days?
Yes, he actually does. He's still involved, and that's where he gets a lot of his money from in the political framework. He's not a presidential candidate in this round, of course, but he's still a mover and shaker in the party over there, and he's got to earn $1, right? And Bain Capital have been long-time associates of Mitt Romney.
Just picking up on what Liza just said about COVID and Victoria, Rob, with what happened in Victoria last week, has there been any impact on clearance rates or property activity in Victoria?
Surprisingly, no. I mean, as I said, the clearance rate was at 64% last weekend, and this time last year it was 67%. So really surprising. I think things will change, as you said in your segment today, when JobKeeper's finished and more people lose jobs. I think we will see a bit of a shift in the property market, definitely.
Well, folks, I think that's a wrap. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar. We will have this available through email and also through Facebook and Zoom. Contact any of the panel members and we'll get that out to you. And it's also searchable on YouTube as well. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great end of 2020 financial year and a much more prosperous and stable 2021 financial year end. I hope that goes well. Thanks again to Yuri Zhang for helping us out today. Really appreciate your candid advice and support with today's webinar. On that, we'll say farewell to everybody.
Thank you. See you again.